Wait, can I money spread with these? Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Nick and I love musicals. And if you've been following me for a while, then you know that I've already made a video on musicals. That time we were talking about stunt casting in the Broadway sphere, but today we're going to talk about the opposite. We're going to talk about amateur musicals. Specifically, we're going to be talking about junior editions of musicals and teen editions. First, to differentiate the two because they're actually not the same. Junior versions of musicals are musicals that are adapted for a younger cast and audience. They typically cut significant portions out of the shows, you know, whether musical numbers or scenes, just to cut down the runtime, because it's really difficult to coach a bunch of like 10-year-olds through a 2-hour show, especially if they're not necessarily like committed to theater, like their parents just wanted them to stay after school so they had longer before they had to go pick them up. And teen versions are also adapted for a younger cast, but not quite as young as junior versions. And these ones typically keep the original length, they just cut out sensitive material like swearing or adult content. Also, before I get too deep into this, I have to mention that this topic actually was requested. So see, I listen. And I feel that I myself am qualified to speak on this topic as I have been in many a junior production. I found my scripts, see 1, 2, and 3. I did all 3 of my middle school's fall plays and then our spring musicals. So I can bring a very unique perspective to this, and I also know what I'm talking about. Luckily, my high school director never made us do teen edition, so I can't necessarily talk on that, but I have seen some teen editions, so I at least have like a little bit of experience with that. So first, starting off with junior productions. Junior productions are interesting, to say the least. They typically are sourced from more age-appropriate source material, so not that much is censored per se, but they do typically cut out a lot of what makes the show great. And I understand they are a great way to get younger kids into theater, so I'm never gonna like dig on them at their core. Plus, their impact isn't totally massive. I mean, most adults going to see a show at their local elementary school aren't expecting to see something of like Broadway caliber. I also get that they really help ticket sales because people are more likely to go see a show that they recognize by name. However, why are we chopping up shows? Like, you can't just cut art in half and expect it to have the same impact. It was written the way that it was for a reason. I feel like a really easy fix would be just creating shows specifically for kids to perform. And obviously, you know, people are already doing that. I'm not going to say that there aren't any kid shows out there, but I feel like if we were able to promote those shows and support them to get them to the same level as the shows that we see perform today, that could be a great way to still get people in seats. That way, everybody is happy. Kids can still get into theaters, parents can be entertained, and the art can remain intact. Audiences can still walk out having seen a full show. Luckily, the junior shows that I put on in middle school weren't too heavily edited, I don't think. I mean, we still had all the big music numbers. We still had a pretty large cast. We were able to have like 40 people on stage at a time, which was insane. And I also really enjoyed performing these shows. I felt like they were a lot of fun to be a part of. You know, growing up, most people hear of Mary Poppins, so to be able to put on a show like that, I now know how to spell supercalifragilisticexpialidocious off the top of my head. And it was a great bonding experience for me and my friends. I met a lot of new friends in that show. I just think that a lot of shows aren't as lucky as the ones I put on. They get chopped up, they get sort of decimated. And I really think that we should try to avoid that. And maybe that's like a really big non-issue, but I don't know. As a writer myself, it feels weird to me to see an incomplete project presented as the whole thing with all the intended messages and themes. It just doesn't seem right to me. It feels icky. But ultimately, for the most part, it's kids putting it on, it's parents watching, so it's not too big of a deal. Now for teen shows. That's a whole different story. Those ones pretty much just suck. Like, okay, I get it. I know, okay? I get the benefits of them. They allow students to perform these really popular, really fun shows that everybody loves in a more age-appropriate way. I get it. And I do think that some shows can be adapted in a way that maintains the original messages, themes, content, but some shows just should not be touched. These 3 came up while I was preparing for this video, so these are going to be our case studies for today. We've got Mean Girls the Musical, Heathers the Musical, and Avenue Q. Mean Girls the Musical is an adaptation of the original movie, and they managed to maintain a lot of the original story while also adding in a lot of great musical numbers, might I say. It depicts a really strong story about teenage bullying with things like fat shaming, slut shaming, homophobia, eating disorders, and heavy alcohol usage. It doesn't shy away from a lot of topics, and it shows it as sort of a realistic lens into teenage life. Then we've got Heathers the musical, which is a lot of times seen as a more extreme version of Mean Girls, although Mean Girls would technically just be like a more tame version of Heathers since Heathers came first. And Heathers the musical also is an adaptation of its original movie. It also has a lot of concepts of teenage bullying, fat shaming, eating disorders, and homophobia, but this one also includes things like teenage suicide, murder, acts of mass school violence, gun violence, and on-stage adult content. Then we've got Avenue Q, which is kind of like a parody of Sesame Street that's made by adults for adults. And this one is definitely the most mature out of the bunch because it has things like racism, homophobia, adult content, puppet nudity, which I didn't know that was a thing, and the list goes on, honestly. And obviously all three of these shows have a lot of profanity and adult language. And also all three of these shows have teen editions. And that just begs the question, like, why are we adapting these shows? Like, what are we doing? What's the point? And I get it, okay? I know that students would want to put on shows that they like to watch. I know that they might engage in this content outside of school, but we shouldn't be inviting students to put on these kinds of shows and engage in this kind of content in a school setting. There's a reason why these shows are performed by all adult casts on or off Broadway. And teens aren't even like the target audience of these shows. I know that Heathers and Mean Girls are about teenagers, but so are movies like Jennifer's Body or Bottoms, and so that's not really saying a lot. And again, like, I completely understand that teenagers might be able to handle these themes, but I don't think we should be putting them in positions where they are acting them out. So then, of course, the rebuttal to that would be then just make teenage versions. That way, the kids can still perform it and it can be catered to them. But I feel like by doing that, you're taking out everything about what makes the show recognizable. Like, imagine if a kid really wanted to drink a beer, like they were like fixated on drinking a beer. So an adult in their life took a beer and then just like diluted it like crazy until it was like 2% beer, 98% water, and then gave that to the kid to drink. Obviously that's better for the kid, you know, kids shouldn't be drinking beer, but at that point just give them a water, like you ruined the beer. All that to say, it just goes back to the concept of preserving the art. Like, if you chop up the show a bunch and remove a bunch of lines and add different ones, like, is it even the same show? Wait, that's kind of like the ship of Theseus problem.
Oh my god, bro.
Okay, so let's go back to our case studies. With Mean Girls, jokes and the content that's surrounding the students and their appearances and their identities, they're harsh, right? Like, I'm not going to deny that, but that's the point. They create this environment of toxicity that then creates our characters. It gives motivations for Katie and Janice and Damien's actions and even the plastics. Nothing in the show makes sense if Regina is censored or if the students aren't allowed to be mean to each other. And to show this, I sought out information about the teen version of Mean Girls, and I found some suggested like line and lyric changes from like Tina Fey and the crew. And there were like 3 pages or something of suggested changes, but I just picked out a few that I thought kind of showed what I was talking about. So for one, the original line was, "This is why I have to be high every day." And the suggested line was, "This is why I wear headphones all day." Yes, they kind of convey the same idea, but the first one is like a laugh line, right? It kind of takes you by surprise. The second one is just like, okay. Next, it also shows how like severely draining and annoying this school can be. And the second one, I'm pretty sure this is Janice's line. The original line was, "Thank you, that would be the tits." And the suggested change was, "Thank you, that would be awesome." Now, obviously the first one is funny because it's very in line with Janice to just like say what she's thinking, no filter. Sometimes it's a little bit like out of the norm, but it is so definitely her. The suggested line is so watered down that it's like anybody could say that. It takes away that tiny bit of her characterization, and it's very sad to see. For the third one, the original line was, "What does this say? Caitlin Clausen has what? Hairy nips." And the suggested line was, "What does this say? Caitlin Clausen has what? Chin hairs." Who cares about chin hairs? And then of course, this one was low-key infamous in my mind from the first time that I saw the teen edition of this show. And it's in I'd Rather Be Me when Janice originally says, "So raise your right finger." And the suggested change is, "So raise your right hand now," which doesn't make any sense because in the original song, Janice is trying to do like a big FU to societal norms and saying that she was going to do her own thing. Whereas in the suggested version, just raise your right hand, which I guess makes sense in one of the contexts because one of the lines is, "So raise your right finger and solemnly swear." So I guess it would make sense to say raise your right hand now and solemnly swear, but the other one is, "So raise your right finger to how girls should behave." So raise your right hand now to how girls should behave. I don't really know how that works. It just sounds forced, and it's very obviously edited later on. And we saw this exact same occurrence in Mean Girls the movie musical, which was the movie based on the musical, based on the movie, based on the book. They changed a lot of elements about the show to make it more like politically correct, but that's the thing. Like everything and everyone in the original movie and the following musical was problematic, and that helped to build the characters into what we now know them to be. It really helped us to view them in a certain way, and it promoted the overall message and meaning of the show that nothing is truly black and white, but that everybody is like a little bit mean. And it's how you deal with those thoughts and urges and tendencies that matters. Now, some line changes that I do agree with are ones that have to do with things like weight or race or other things like that. Like Regina has that one line where she says, "I never weigh more than 115," and that was changed to, "That filter you use looks just like me." And I think that stuff like that is totally fine because it opens up the door for actors of different body types to occupy the role of Regina. Like, we know that Regina has issues with her weight and her body image, and that's eventually how Katie and Janice take her down, but that specific line wasn't necessary in showing that, and it's ultimately just exclusionary because we see later on in Revenge Party when Regina's like, "I need to lose 3 pounds, bring me a whole box," and that shows, you know, that she might be a little bit obsessive about her weight, knowing that she has to lose like as little as 3 pounds, and that shows that part of her character enough without having to put like a specific number on her overall weight, if that makes sense. However, I do acknowledge that some things like that cannot and should not be changed. Like in Heathers the Musical, for example, Martha's weight is a very defining character trait. It's what a lot of the students in the school use to bully her. Of course, they do say things like calling her a weirdo and stuff like that, but ultimately the first thing that they go for is her weight, and it's supposed to show how ruthless and like unabashed these students are in their bullying. Taking out the fat jokes, while definitely nicer to hear, would completely ruin that point. I cannot emphasize it enough. Yes, the words are mean, but that's what makes the characters who they are. The Heathers are raunchy, the students are insufferable. I mean, that's literally what Veronica sings about in the entire first number of the show. And none of that makes any sense if everything is watered down. That's also, oh my gosh, that's also why I hate the change from Blue to You're Welcome. Now, this is actually relevant because originally it was just changed to You're Welcome for teen and school editions of the show, but eventually it just came to take over all amateur and professional versions of the show. I'd rather be me, I'd rather be me, I'd rather be me than be with you, I'd rather be me. Despite just being like the worst song of the two, You're Welcome literally only exists to correct Blue's making light of an awful situation. It's a literal like date grape scenario, so I completely understand why people would want it to be taken more seriously, but that's the point of the show. It's a satire, so it exaggerates everything to get its point across. Shock value is like 50% of the show and why it works so well. No one is expecting you to like Curtin Ram, and especially not in that scene. Blue's like over the top theatrics are supposed to make Curtin Ram unlikable, and the show is expecting its audience to have a certain level of discernment and understand that they, in this case, and pretty much throughout the entire show, are the bad guys. They're not somebody to sympathize with. Like, the absurdity of the situation might get some laughs from the audience, but it's not the actual content that's funny, obviously. But that's literally the point of a dark comedy. That's what makes them recognizable in the genre. The point of Blue is to show just how little teenage boys care about women's autonomy and how they see bedroom time as more of a joke or a conquest rather than something that women are coerced into all the time, like they are actively doing in the scene. By altering literally all of the lines in the song to make it more cliche, they're like Disney Channel bullies at that point, and more easily digestible by audiences, and by, giving power back to Veronica, like some people say, it makes it a lot less frowned upon by people who fundamentally do not understand the show, but it completely strips the scene of its original meaning. And ultimately, I get that it was the original creator's decision to change the song, but I don't care. It's a bad decision because Veronica doesn't have power in that situation, just like many other women who have been in that same position. Like, I think that that's a perfect example of how they tried to make it too like girl power, and they completely neglected like the actual grim reality of the situation. Not to mention that the resolution in Blue makes a lot more sense than in You're Welcome. In Blue, Veronica gets Kurt and Ram so drunk to the point where they like can't stop her when she escapes. Versus in You're Welcome, she like sweeps their legs out from under them after literally saying earlier in the song that they're bigger and stronger than her and she can't overpower them physically. So I don't know how that happened. Also, the rest of the show is already super dark. Like, I would completely get it if it was a show where like everything else was taken seriously and with correct care, and then that was like one isolated incident, so they decided to change it. But it's like the entire show is satirical, so I don't understand why they would just change that one part. To me, it made sense with the rest of the show, so I don't understand why it was necessary to change it, but I digress. So just like for Mean Girls, I decided to go through and find some lyric changes from the original like Heather's cast recording to the school version. Now, some of these are just ones that I've seen people talking about. Some of them are directly from like recordings of teen versions that I've seen. So if there's multiple versions out there, that's why. So the first one is in Candy Store, where the Heathers are singing to Veronica, and the original line was, "Prove you're not a wussy anymore." And the change that I saw was, "Prove you're not a doorknob anymore." I don't know what that means. I have never heard anybody called a doorknob, and honestly, if somebody called me a doorknob, I would just be like, what are you talking about? I might laugh, because what kind of insult is that? Like, honestly, they could have said doormat and that would have made more sense, because it's like they're telling her not to be walked all over and that she needs to start doing things of her own initiative. But doorknob? Like, what? And this one is in Big Fun, like the big party scene. The original line is, "When mom and dad forget to lock the liquor cabinet." It was then changed to, "It's time we overflow the hot tub on the patio." The first line wasn't even bad. Like, yes, it implies underage drinking and stuff, but in the grand scheme of the show, is that really the worst thing that we're talking about? Like, where are our priorities here? Then we have one specifically in Dead Girl Walking that I found. Now, obviously, this entire song is pretty mature, and this line is specifically from when they're like actively doing it on stage. And the original line was, "Slap me, pull my hair, touch me there and there and there," which obviously is very suggestive, but the adapted line that I found was, "Teach me to be brave, I am standing in my grave." No correlation there. I get that it's supposed to play into like the whole like dead girl walking sort of idea, but somehow it manages to go from like, yeah, to like, teach me to be brave. What? I don't know how we got there. Sure. And these shows, Heathers and Mean Girls, are so epic, and it hurts my soul to see them watered down like this. Let these students be mean. And then for Avenue Q, do I even have to say anything? Like, two of the songs in the original soundtrack are "Everyone's a Little Bit Racist" and "The Internet is for Corn." Students should not be putting this show on, like adapted or not. It's clearly not meant for them. One comparison that kept coming to mind when I was like looking into adapting musicals was Scamilton. And if you've never heard of Scamilton, basically like a couple years ago, this one church decided to illegally put on a production of Hamilton. They did not obtain the rights. The rights, I'm pretty sure, weren't even out yet, so it was very blatant, and they adapted a bunch of parts of the show to be more like approved by God, I guess. Like, they made Hamilton like God-fearing, which, I mean, I guess he was like later on in the show, but not in the beginning. And they had him like talk about Jesus and stuff, and I was like, how? What? Also, during Say No to This, I'm pretty sure like halfway through the song, Hamilton and Mariah like took hands and then just like walked off stage, and then the song just like played out. And it was like at that point, why are you putting on the show? And while this is an example of trying to take a musical that was intended for older audiences and adapting it for, I guess, a more religious audience, everyone clowned on it for the same reasons that I'm critiquing teen shows. If you have to cut out entire songs and edit the source material to your liking, then why even do the show? Like, they could have just done like a Christmas show or something. I kind of feel the same way with a bunch of like clean versions of songs, especially like rap songs. Like, can you imagine somebody trying to make a clean version of WAP without any adult language or innuendos or anything? It would just be a bunch of like bleeps or silences. Like, there's no point. That was like the clean version of "Denial is a River" by Doechii, when he was just like, I like. But honestly, like getting the rights to shows is so expensive. Like I remember in high school, I would talk to my director sometimes and he would say like, yeah, half of the budget for this show is just going to getting the rights. And I was like, oh my gosh, bro. That's why we were always broke. Although it honestly gives me a lot more respect for my middle school theater because we were putting on these like big name shows. Like for us to be putting on Mary Poppins and like Frozen, I can't even imagine how expensive the rights must have been for those. And we still managed to have like really high production values for those shows. Like we had like entire professionally constructed sets that people would be like walking and climbing on and stuff. We had like actual choreographers come in and do our dance numbers. We had a very robust hair and makeup department that was run by like parents compared to in high school where they were just like, you know what, just get it done. I don't care how it gets done, just get it done. And in Scamilton's case, because it was very clearly an illegal production, Hamilton's legal team caught wind of it and pursued legal action because, like, bro, they posted it and everything. Like, what are you expecting? But in conclusion, I don't think that these junior or these teen editions are the end of the world, okay? Theater is such an expansive art form, and I don't think it helps anybody to limit our expression so harshly. That being said, I do think that there is at least something that we can do to preserve the art and not taint it by putting on these crazy adapted versions. We can keep it in its original form and have it performed by its intended cast. We can write shows for younger creators that can become as beloved as the ones that we know today. I mean, think about The Wizard of Oz. Everybody knows it, most people love it, and it can be performed as is by kids. And that way, theater can be enjoyed by everyone. I hope everything that I said made sense. I actually really like talking about musicals. I'm very passionate about this, if you can tell. But let me know what you guys think. If you think that You're Welcome is a better song than Blue, then let me know. I mean, you're wrong, but I'll hear you out. I mean, everybody has opinions, but that doesn't make them true. I don't really know what else there is to say, but I don't have an outro, so bye. Everybody has opinions, but it doesn't make them true.